Hi, welcome to the Prairie Oaks Pulpit Bible Study. I'm glad you're joining me for our Bible study together. And if you want, pull out your device or a Bible and let's look at the book of 1 Samuel. So you got the first 5 books of Moses through Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, a little bit of Ruth, and 1 Samuel. And it's chapter 7, but I'm going to tell a little bit of the story to set the stage. Because if you're not familiar with the neighborhood of the Bible here, they did really good in the days of Joshua of obeying the Lord, and the Lord gave them the promised land that they were they left Egypt to receive back in Exodus. But after Joshua, they kind of went downhill, and they would follow the Lord for a little while, and then they would drift away, go back to worshiping the idols of the nations and the peoples around them. And God would withdraw, and they would, because they were withdrawing from Him, and then they would begin to suffer the consequences of their sin and their betrayal of God. And then they would not like that, and eventually they'd come around to cry out to God to rescue them, and it just became a pattern. And the pattern gets pretty bad, and in the days of Samson and Samuel, even the judge is pretty sinful. We wouldn't use Samson as a role model for our morals, I hope. And yet the Lord used him to defeat the physical enemies of the children of Israel, but it didn't do anything for the heart. And that's really where we get to, as in the days of Eli, who followed Samson. The children of Israel weren't repenting. Eli wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't singular for the Lord, and he allowed his sons to commit abomination of sin against God. And when they went out against the Philistines defeated them. And so they said, well, we need to take our lucky box with us, and they took the Ark of the Covenant with them, assuming that they could force God to be on their side. And God gave them over to their enemies and allowed His footstool, the Ark of the Covenant, to fall into the hands of the enemy, the Philistines. And the tabernacle and the city that had the tabernacle, it was all destroyed, a place called Shiloh. And so, trying to keep it short, the Ark of the Covenant didn't stay with the Philistines for long, because the Lord gave them a reminder that no, it wasn't your gods that won, it was my holiness that caused the children of Israel to sin, or to be defeated. And so it didn't take long for the Philistines decided they didn't want anything to do with having the Ark of the Covenant if it meant they had to give up their gods. And so they sent the Ark of the Covenant back to the children of Israel. And eventually it lands in a town called Kirjath Jearim, which is my way of pronouncing it. It's not the right way. I know that it isn't. Kirjath Jearim may be better, but even then I'm pretty sure a good Hebrew would roll his eyes at that pronunciation. But that's where we pick up in chapter 7 of 1 Samuel, is that the Ark of the Lord is in this town, but the people, they have the Ark, but they don't have things right with God yet, and they're going to get that straightened out. So chapter 7 of 1 Samuel, verse 1, then the men of Kirjath Jearim came and took the Ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the Ark of the Lord. So it was that the Ark remained in Kirjath Jearim for a long time, and it was there 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. I want to pause. I'm going to break up my readings here along the way, so bear with me. But the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. I think that's a key phrase for us. They knew the Lord wasn't with them, and it grieved them. And that was a good start. That's not repentance yet, but it's a good start. They realized that there was something between them and God, their God. Then Samuel, verse 3, spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your hearts, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths from among you, and prepare your hearts for the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So the children of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtoreths, and served the Lord only. One, you have to compliment them. They realized that God wasn't with them. Remember, I referenced Samson earlier. He didn't realize at times that God was not with him because he'd gotten so used to living in his own abilities. He thought that the gift was his right, and that wasn't true. And so the children of Israel this time, they realized that the gift of God's presence wasn't a right, and it wasn't even theirs anymore. And so Samuel preaches to them, if you want to return to the Lord, it's you that's moved. These are the things that are in the way. These foreign gods, these Ashtoreths, that's another god. Baal and Ashtoreth, the god of thunder and love, really get down to, it was where they sought prosperity and sexual pleasure. I want you to imagine how different our country would be if we didn't have gods of prosperity and sexual pleasure. Our hearts would be different, wouldn't it? And so the children of Israel had to prepare their hearts to go from what they had been doing to serve the Lord. Now, there's nothing wrong with prosperity or sexual pleasure within the bounds that God has given those gifts. But when the gifts replace the giver, then they've become idols. When we pursue those gifts beyond the bounds that God has given those things, then they've become idols. And so he says, you need to put away those. You need to put away Baal. You need to put away Ashtoreth. You need to put away these false gods so that you can serve the Lord only. That word only is a key word in that paragraph. All and only. That's what the Lord wants. He doesn't want to be in the top 3 because he doesn't deserve that. Whatever you have is a gift from him. He's the only one that's allowed to be jealous because we belong to him. We wouldn't exist without him. And so the children of Israel, they respond. And they're like, okay, well, if that's what needs to be done, obviously Baal and Ashtoreth, these false gods, prosperity and sexual pleasure aren't doing it anymore. We're dying. We need the giver of life. We need the Lord only. So verse 5, and Samuel said, gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered together at Mizpah, drew water, and poured it out before the Lord. And they fasted that day and said there, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the children of Israel at Mizpah. And this is another key section, isn't it? They went back to one of the ancient landmarks. If you've read through Joshua, you'd recognize the name Mizpah. It even shows up in the book of Judges. It was one of the old landmarks of fervency for God. So they went to that place and they did the 3 steps of repentance. It says that they fasted. They grieved for their sin, not just the consequences, not for what they had lost. But they grieved what their sin was, a rebellion against God. And they confessed, we've sinned against the Lord. And they made changes in their life. We saw that with the putting away the idols. Having Samuel judge the children of Israel, he's helping them with the specifics. This is the specific things that need changed in your life. Would we respond when the Lord puts his finger on specific things and says, this is how you are replacing me with these idols? Get away from the idol and come back to the Lord. And so they got serious. There was contrition, there was grief, there was confession, there was admitting their sin, and there was consecration. They made changes. Verse 7. Now when the Philistines heard that the children of Israel had gathered together at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And this serves as a reminder, anytime that revival gets beginning, there's going to be resistance. It may come from within, or sometimes it will come from without, from the outside. And that's what happens here, is the Philistines are like, oh, there's something going on. We don't trust this. And they weren't specifically going against revival in the children of Israel. They were just looking out for their own self-interest. They were on top. Israel was their servants, their slaves. But they were pawns in the hands of the devil, who is out to keep us from revival. And the Lord allows those tests because he wants us to see that he's the provider. He will be the one who brings prosperity. He's the one who brings life. At his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. And so the Philistines come. And when the children of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. So the children of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. The children of Israel were afraid. We shouldn't operate out of fear. We shouldn't operate out of anger. We should operate out of trust of God and curiosity. And curiosity for good things. And so they cry out to God. They admitted they didn't have the strength to win this on their own. And they were right. It's a good place for us to be, is to realize rightfully that we need God. We need his help. There's bigger enemies than you and I can handle. And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. Then Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. Now as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered with a loud thunder upon the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. And the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and drove them back as far as below Bethkar. So they cried out. The Lord was worshipped. It sounds like they didn't even head out to battle. They just stayed right there, and God gave the victory before they even got their army mustered, before they even got ready to fight, because he was going to fight. And you notice he did it with thunder. Now we know lightning is what kills you, not the thunder. But the reality is that God was demonstrating once again, he doesn't need us. He doesn't need anything. He scared them with a loud noise. And they fled from the Lord. And it's interesting, it is thunder. You remember Baal? That was his trick, wasn't it? When he's supposed to be the god of thunder. But instead, the Lord is the true provider. He brings the prosperity. He'll provide the protection. He'll provide what we need and more. And so he provides the victory. And enemy was confused, and they fled, and they were able to pursue them and chase them off. And that's where our key verse comes in. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin, and called its name Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. They started out at a landmark called Mizpah, an ancient landmark of centuries ago, revival from the Lord. And Samuel says this is a new landmark for future generations. The Lord gave us victory. The Lord moved us forward. The stone of help The Lord is our helper. And the question to us is, are we setting up reminders of how the Lord has helped us? Are we marking those victories when God gives them? Or are we even winning against sin and against temptation? Or are we still conceding territory in our hearts to the enemy? Are we still just defeated? Because we can't do it in our own strength, only in the Lord. And so we commemorate the victory with confidence that there's more to come, not of our own strength, but of the Lord. And chapter 7 ends with a reminder that that's what happened. The prophet is the one who helped them not against their physical enemies, but against their spiritual enemy, and helped them take care of the heart so that real victory could take place. Samuel proved to be the better judge out of all of the other judges because he went to the heart. And that's where revival needs to be, for us to be revived spiritually in the Lord. And so I pray we cooperate with God's Spirit in that. And we raise our Ebenezer. Thus far the Lord has helped us, and safely we will arrive at home. God bless, God keep you. Thank you for joining me. If you have time, check out some of the music. I posted a link to a song that mentions Ebenezer. Good night.